for organizing everything, especially the technical aspects. As you know, we shall now talk about the contacts between Venetian Cyprus and Dalmatia during the late 15th and 16th centuries, more specifically from 1473 to 1569. The Venetian presence in Dalmatia and Cyprus goes back several centuries, before the period under discussion in this paper. Dalmatia first came under Venetian control during the rule of Doge Vitale Falier, who reigned from 1085 to 1096, and who, in return for helping the Byzantines during their war against the Normans of southern Italy, obtained a crucible from Emperor Alexis I Comnenus, granting him and his successors jurisdiction over the lands of Dalmatia and Croatia, thereby enabling the Doges of Venice to title themselves, quote, Doges of Venice, Dalmatia, and Croatia, end quote. It was, moreover, under the Byzantine dynasty of the Comneni that the Venetians first obtained commercial privileges on Cyprus, for the initial privileges Emperor Alexius had granted them were extended under his son and successor John Comnenus to include the ports of Crete and Cyprus in the crucible of 1126. Venetian economic penetration was marked both in Dalmatia and in Cyprus. In Dalmatia, the Venetians utilized the ports as a strategic drop-off zones for the cargoes their ships carried, while they also imported foodstuffs such as cheese and herds of livestock, thence to Venice itself. On Cyprus, the Venetians had acquired extensive urban and rural properties and landholdings, confiscated according to a Venetian report compiled in around 1243, although the precise reasons for these confiscations and the dates in which they took place are unclear. Venetian control over Dalmatia and Cyprus in the years leading up to the late 15th century was not unchallenged. In the second half of the 14th century, King Louis of Hungary and his allies deprived Venice of Dalmatia, but by 1410 Venice, having recovered from the war of Chioggia against Genoa, regained the Dalmatian port cities that had themselves requested to return to Venetian rule, finding it preferable to being fought over by the thrones of Hungary and Naples. Subsequent plans by the King of Hungary to recover Dalmatia from Venice in 1418 failed. On Cyprus, the Catalan supporters of King James II tried to overthrow his Venetian widow, Queen Catherine Cornaro, after the king's death in August 1473, and to place the island under the control of King Ferrante of Naples. However, they were forced to flee the island when Venice landed troops and began to hunt them down, finally departing from Cyprus in January 1474. Under Queen Catherine, who reigned from 1474 to 1489, Cyprus came under Venetian control, and following her abdication in 1489, direct Venetian rule was imposed over the island. Therefore, by the last quarter of the 15th century, Venetian rule over Dalmatia and Cyprus was secure, and contacts between both these regions are examined within the context of Venetian rule. Dalmatians on Cyprus are first mentioned within the context of Venetian mercenaries. Florio Bustron, a Cypriot chronicler in Venetian service, who wrote his chronicle on the history of Cyprus in the second half of the 16th century, states that at the end of 1473, the Venetian fleet landed 300 men on Cyprus, who killed a man serving the titular Count of Tripoli, one of the prominent Cypriot nobles. His relative George Bustronius, whose own chronicle on the history of Cyprus between the years 1456 and 1489 was probably written in the early 16th century, and so is nearer in time to the events that it describes, is more specific. He relates that in December 1473, 4 days after the landing of 300 men by the Venetian fleet, quote, the men from Dalmatia killed a good man in the service of the Count of Tripoli, end quote. More references to Dalmatian mercenaries on Cyprus follow. In late January 1474, following a dispute between the Count of Rojas and Don Gonsalvo Perez, the captain of Famagusta, and the visit the Count then made to the galley of the Venetian Proveditore of Cyprus to resolve the matter, the Proveditore dispatched 25 Dalmatian mercenaries to arrest Gonsalvo and to bring him to the galley. Gonsalvo, detained on this galley, was finally released on the 1st of February 1474, resuming his duties as captain of Famagusta. In May 1474, Gonsalvo was involved in a dispute that had arisen after some Italians and Greeks resident in Famagusta attacked Venetians, who had refused to pay the town's prostitutes for their services. Famagusta became agitated because of the dispute, and a Dalmatian armed with a sword rushed into the queen's chamber. When George, the titular Count of Jaffa, tried to restrain him, the Dalmatian drew his dagger and tried to stab the Count. He was finally overpowered and hurled to the ground by two other men in the Queen's chamber and was then jailed and put in irons. Unfortunately, it is not recorded why this unknown Dalmatian, probably a mercenary in Venetian service, had assaulted the Count of Jaffa. From these references, it appears that Dalmatian mercenaries in Venetian pay were serving on Cyprus from the beginning of Queen Catherine Cornaro's reign, before Cyprus came under direct Venetian rule. Dalmatians do not appear to have continued serving as mercenaries on Cyprus during the period of direct Venetian rule, from 1489 to 1571. In 1562, according to the historian of Cyprus George Hill, the Venetian Bernard Sagredo, who had been dispatched to Cyprus as Proveditor General, wrote a highly critical report regarding the military capabilities and the government of the island. To improve the military capabilities and defense of Cyprus, Sagredo suggested, among other things, the recruitment of 200 cavalrymen, apparently from Dalmatia or elsewhere. Nevertheless, the published versions of Sagredo's report simply refer to, quote, stradioti forestieri, end quote, that is, soldiers from overseas, without specifying the places of origin. It is not known, moreover, whether Sagredo's recommendation was ever implemented. During the period under discussion, Venetian officials, engineers, translators, and other professionals were, or at least could be, transferred from Dalmatia to Cyprus and vice versa. The report of the Venetian Logotenente on Cyprus, Alvise d'Arriva, written on 15th of December 1545, refers to the fortification works being constructed in Famagusta, the island's main port, and to the need to dispatch an engineer to Cyprus, who, in conjunction with the military commander, who was expected to arrive there, would oversee the works. Together, they would formulate and submit recommendations on the types of fortifications to be built there. By way of example, Alvise d'Arriva mentions how the Venetian government had dispatched engineers to Dalmatia, Corfu, Crete, and other places. The career of Giulio Savorgnan, a professional soldier entrusted with important military commands and with fortifying various Venetian strongholds of the Stato del Mar, including the fortifications of Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, illustrates the interconnectivity of strongholds on Cyprus with those of Dalmatia and other places in the Venetian overseas possessions. In 1551, Savorgnan became governor of the important fortress of Corfu and was requested to offer important advice on the right materials for the fortifications of two Italian mainland cities, but also Zara on the Dalmatian coast. He visited Cyprus briefly before being transferred to Crete as governor of the principal fortresses there, and was finally appointed to the prestigious post of Governor General of Dalmatia, with Zara as his base. In 1567, he returned to Corfu as commander of the fortress there, but was then dispatched urgently to Cyprus as Governor General of the militia, remaining there until May 1569. Returning to Venice at the end of 1569, he was sent to Zara until the summer of 1571. The career of Michael Membre, a translator and interpreter of the Venetian Republic who had been born on Cyprus in around 1509, possibly of mixed Circassian and Greek Cypriot parentage, likewise illustrates how persons in Venetian service could travel between Cyprus and Dalmatia, and to other places under Venetian rule. Membre, who had been raised in the household of the Cypriot nobleman Bernardo Benedetti and was employed in his service, made his mark in Venetian public service by successfully carrying out a secret mission to Persia between the years 1539 and 1542, which secured him an annual lifetime pension of 100 ducats, in return for which he had to reside in Venice and to be available for public service on request. He subsequently served as an interpreter at the Ottoman court in Istanbul, and following his return to Venice was summoned to accompany Alvise Renier, who had been appointed special commissioner to Dalmatia to negotiate with the Ottoman officials over problems concerning the frontiers between Venice and the Ottoman Empire there. After this mission, which must have been of several months' duration, Membre, on returning to Venice, petitioned the Senate in June 1547 to be nominated as an official dragoman. In effect, in accepting his petition and nominating him as dragoman of the Turkish language, the Senate, besides giving him an annual salary of 100 ducats, in addition to the pension he already received, stated that among his various duties were those of, quote, accompanying our ambassadors to Constantinople and our proveditori and other officials in Dalmatia and other places as needed. Membre's activities as dragoman or head translator are recorded as continuing up to 1589, 5 years before his death in 1594. In 1576, 5 years after Cyprus' conquest by the Ottomans, he was summoned by the Venetian Council of Ten to go to Istanbul and work together with Giacomo Soranzo, the Venetian ambassador there, with materials regarding the agreements reached previously on the frontiers of Dalmatia, in the conclusion of which he had played a key role far back in 1550. Membre's prior experience in this area and the documents he had brought with him enabled him and Soranzo to establish a new understanding on the boundaries between Ottoman and Venetian lands in Dalmatia in August 1576. This understanding, signed by Soranzo and Ottoman officials, was translated along with the accompanying documents by Membre. Because of the services he had rendered Venice, Membre was entitled to receive the grade of citizenship known as Cittadino de Intus, a grade also granted from the early 15th century onwards to citizens of Italian terra firma towns, but also to some citizens of Dalmatian towns forming part of the Venetian Stato del Mar. Similar arrangements may have applied to other Stato del Mar lands during the 16th century, including Venetian Cyprus, whence Membre originated. The grain trade was another extremely important point of contact between Dalmatia and Cyprus. In 1478, while Cyprus was still under the rule of the Venetian Queen Catherine Cornell, the Council of Ten, because of shortages of food occurring in Venice and in its overseas territories of Dalmatia and Albania, decreed that all Venetian ships could sail to Cyprus to transport Cypriot wheat and other grains to these territories, with a proviso addressed to Venetian councillors on Cyprus that only such quantities could be exported as would allow enough grain on the island to satisfy the needs of the Cypriot population. Such provisos were normal in all requests for grain shipments from Cyprus, because the Council of Ten wished to maintain an adequate supply of food on Cyprus to maintain social and political stability. Cypriot grain continued to be exported to Dalmatia after 1489, when Cyprus came under direct Venetian rule. On 13th of August 1504, the Council of Ten issued various export licenses for Cypriot grain to be sent to Venice, but also to Šibenik in Dalmatia. The relevant concession stated that the people of Šibenik could import from Cyprus 2,000 stara of barley and 5,000 stara of wheat for their requirements. A document dated 1st of June 1514 alludes to how Ruscus Pauli, also known as Ruscetus, from the island of Lupud de Ragusa, had received 200 gold Venetian ducats from Leonardo Sagariga to journey to Cyprus and purchase grain there for Leonardo's brother Aloysius, although eventually Rucius, unable to perform this undertaking, promised to return the money given to him in installments. On the 22nd of February 1515, the Council of Ten utilized 1,500 stara of wheat exported from Cyprus to pay soldiers stationed to guard various localities of Dalmatia. On the 30th of July 1519, following an Ottoman demand that the customary annual tribute from Cyprus, amounting to 8,000 Venetian ducats, should now be paid in cash and not in a mixture of cash and textiles, such as Cypriot camlets, the Council of Ten instructed the Venetian government on Cyprus to dispatch the monies collected on the island to Zara in Dalmatia on board the galleys that were expected to arrive there soon. On the 3rd of August 1524, the Council of Ten ordered the Venetian government on Cyprus to allow the dispatch of grain from Cyprus to various Venetian possessions, namely Venice itself, Candia, the capital of Crete, and Venetian territories in Dalmatia. One observes that between 1473 and 1570, Venice and the Ottoman Empire were at war on 3 occasions. Venetian-controlled territories in Dalmatia were ravaged by these wars, as well as by piratical raids by the Uskoks of Senia, Ottoman pirates from Dulcinea, and Maghrebin pirates. Even during peacetime, the theft of livestock, robbery, and attacks on caravans across the border regularly took place. Cyprus, on the other hand, enjoyed relative peace until the Ottoman invasion of 1570. Therefore, it was natural for Venice to send Cypriot grain to Dalmatia to sustain both its garrisons there and the inhabitants of the Dalmatian cities. The Venetian-Ottoman War of 1537-1540 ravaged the rural areas of Venice's Adriatic possessions. The seizure of thousands of captives and livestock in this war and in various other Ottoman incursions against Venetian Dalmatia being among the results of these conflicts. One can place within this context the presentation by Jacopo Dalmeso, a layman from Cyprus, before the offices of public notary of Ragusa on the 21st of March 1544 of a bull of Pope Paul III, authorizing him to ransom captives detained in the lands occupied by the infidel. In a second document of the same date, Dalmeso appointed as his representative a fellow Cypriot named Ioannis Constantini, who was resident in Ragusa, for collections of the sums required for the captives' redemption, on account of being unable to journey himself to the lands of the infidel. In addition, he authorized Constantini to appoint lieutenants in his stead to engineer the raising of sums for ransoming captives. Other than Ioannis Constantini, there are no records of Cypriots resident in Ragusa or other Dalmatian cities during the period under discussion. Dalmatian seamen visited Cyprus in the overall context of the export of Cypriot grain to various parts of the Venetian Empire, as well as grain from other areas under Venetian control. On the 10th of March 1526, Paul Fiorenti, who along with his associates had hired a ship named Santa Maria on the 22nd of November 1525 from Captain Giorgi de Piero from the island of Leput, concluded an agreement at Valona on the coast of Albania, whereby the captain equipped the ship, provided a crew of 32 men, and undertook to sail to various eastern Mediterranean destinations, including Cyprus, with a cargo of Albanian wheat. A document dated 12th of October 1527 informs us that the Venetian government of Cyprus informed the Council of Ten of how it had dispatched 8,472 modi of wheat on account of the arsenal of Venice on board the ship captained by Bartolo da Liesena, who originated, as appears from his surname, from the island of Liesina or Liesna, presently called Hvar, located on the eastern Adriatic seaboard near Dubrovnik, at that time called Ragusa. More unusual in the context of Dalmatians visiting Cyprus is the instance of the Ragusan monk named Zwane, whom the Council of Ten had ordered to be placed in custody within the citadel of Famagusta for 6 years. According to the report submitted on the 22nd of June 1516 by the captain of the ship transporting him to Famagusta, a certain Stoderin from the island of Corfu, the monk had escaped from the ship when it reached Rhodes, then under the rule of the Knights Hospitaller. It was not known how this monk had managed to free himself of the chains binding him. Furthermore, although they had searched for him throughout the island of Rhodes, they had been unable to find him. On one recorded occasion, a Greek from Cyprus named Marco was incarcerated in Ragusa, and on the 3rd of November 1569, the Ragusan Senate voted by a majority of 24 for and 16 against to have him put to torture. Neither in the monk Zwane's case, nor in that of Marco, do we know the reasons why they were sentenced to incarceration, and in Marco's case, torture as well. Locusts periodically plagued Cyprus during medieval times, and up until the end of the 19th century, destroying the crops and causing a dearth of foodstuffs. One of the destructive visitations of locusts took place in 1534, and the resultant shortage of grain due to the destruction of that year's harvest caused problems in the supply of vitals to the garrison of Famagusta, as well as to Nicosia, the island's capital. It is noteworthy that on the 23rd of November 1534, after this calamity, a maritime association was formed in Ragusa between Mateusz Kromicic, the owner of a galleon, and Serafino Marini de Bona, the representative of 10 Ragusan merchants. They agreed that Kromicic should journey to the Gulf of Volos in Greece or to the neighboring areas, purchase wheat there with the capital invested by the association, and then journey to Cyprus and sell the wheat there at the best price possible. Kromicic insured his ship for the journey and undertook on reaching Cyprus to load the cargo of salt on board his ship before returning to Ragusa. One observes here that the production of salt on Venetian Cyprus was a government monopoly that yielded considerable revenues and was exported to Venice as well as to other Adriatic destinations. Shortly after this, on the 10th of November 1534, the Council of Ten of Venice granted the Urban Assembly of Nicosia the permission it had solicited from it to conclude an agreement with a certain Trifone Drago, whose family originated from Dalmatia, for the purchase of 10,000 stara of wheat, Trifon Drago and his associates undertook to transport the wheat to Cyprus from various regions of Greece, with the Gulf of Patras or that of Volo mentioned as possible supply centers, according to the terms of an agreement he signed with Juan Piero de Micheli, the representative of the Proveditore supervising the supply of wheat on Cyprus, and Hercules Palol, the representative of the ambassador of the Council of Nobles of Nicosia, and regarding which the Council of Ten bestowed its approval. Unfortunately for Cyprus, this agreement ran into problems when implemented. On the 29th of December, 1534, the Council of Ten informed the Venetian government of Cyprus that 2 ships loaded with grain were supposed to arrive in Cyprus, but that one of them, belonging to Captain Fantin de Bartolomeo, had suffered damages of the island of Mezzo, the island opposite Ragusa that is now named Lupud. Because of this, the ship, with 3,000 stara of wheat on board, had to be transported to Ragusa for repairs, and it was hoped that it would be able to resume its journey soon. Nevertheless, it would be impossible for the ship to transport its cargo of wheat until the coming February, and it was expected to arrive in Cyprus by the 8th of April. The increasing popularity of Cypriot salt as an import to Dalmatian ports, sometimes at the expense of wheat, is illustrated by a document dated 12th of April 1535. According to a decision of the Ragusan Senate, passed by a large majority, the order was given that those who had conducted 2 Ragusan ships to the eastern Mediterranean to buy grain should not do so. Instead, they should take salt on board from some East Mediterranean port. If, however, they had already taken grain on board their ships, then one ship would sail to Chios in the Aegean and the other to Cyprus or to Crete. Wherever the grain could be sold more dearly, take salt on board and return to Ragusa. Furthermore, were they unable to unload and sell all the grain, then the ship captained by a certain Thomas would take on board the grain from the other ship, which now, emptied of its cargo, would then sail to take on board a cargo of salt and return to Ragusa. The last recorded journey made by a ship from Ragusa to Cyprus, just before the Ottoman conquest, to purchase grain at Larnaca, was that of the Santa Caterina, captained by Marin de Andrea, who in January 1556 had hired his ship to the merchants Niccolò di Marino di Gozzi from Ragusa and Andrea Niccolò from Cataro. It was forced, however, to stay for 3 months at Tripoli in Syria because of an outbreak of plague, and eventually the representative of the 2 merchants, a certain Iago Luca de Bona, instructed his agent in Larnaca to take back from Marin the 950 gold ducats he had been given to buy grain and other merchandise, with the ship directed to depart from Cyprus for Venice. The relative frequency of Cypriot grain shipments to Ragusa in the 16th century is not difficult to explain. Croatia, the hinterland of Ragusa and of Dalmatia in general, was ravaged systematically by continuous Ottoman raids and conquests from 1391 to the 1570s. Because of these raids, numerous peasants and others fled from Croatia and the interior of Dalmatia to various places, including Ragusa. Whereas the population of Croatia decreased due to the flight of its people in the face of Ottoman depredations, that of Ragusa increased. This population increase benefited Ragusa economically, as the city, which had a very versatile labor market, could employ the immigrants as sailors, laborers, builders, craftsmen, and in other occupations directly or indirectly connected to its flourishing overseas commerce. Ragusa had shipyards, which constructed ships for its merchant fleet, which increased markedly between 1470 and 1570, although after 1570 its maritime economy declined because the principal maritime trading routes switched from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. On the other hand, Ragusa did not produce enough grain to sustain its increased population. Therefore, the importation of grain from Cyprus, parts of Greece, and elsewhere was essential to feed the city's growing population. Nevertheless, grain from Cyprus was dispatched to Ragusa and Dalmatia in general less frequently during the second half of the 16th century, because as Cyprus' own population increased during this period, correspondingly less grain was available for export. The Ottoman invasion of Cyprus in 1570 was accompanied by Ottoman attacks against Venetian Dalmatia, although the Christian victory at the naval battle of Lepanto in October 1571 stopped these Ottoman advances. Following negotiations between Venice and the Ottoman Empire, a peace treaty concluded in March 1573 was regarded as highly favorable by Venice, since it re-established full Venetian sovereignty over the lands it had held in Dalmatia and Albania. Another final treaty concluded between Venice and the Ottoman Empire in the summer of 1576 lasted right up until the Ottoman attack on Venetian Crete, the so-called War of Candia, from 1645 to 1669. The Treaty of 1576 stabilized, at least to some extent, the Venetian-Ottoman boundary in Dalmatia, although Turkish cavalry incursions continued at a local level. The commodities traded between Cyprus and Dalmatia were not limited to shipments of grain and salt. Spices were brought from Cyprus to Dalmatian ports. According to a document dated 11th of May 1541, 3 Ragusan merchants, Marino Benedicto de Gondula, Matteo Bonici, and Vukaso Natalis, reached an agreement with Mateos Tomai Kromizic, the captain of the galleon San Nicola, whereby the latter undertook to journey on their behalf from Ragusa to Cyprus. Thence, he would sail to Tripoli and Jaffa on the coast of Syria and Palestine, and then to Anamur, miswritten as Aman, and to Alaya on the southern Turkish coast. On board ship, he was transporting various cherry-colored, red, scarlet, yellow, and green textiles, canvases, 2 butts from Apulia of wine, probably containing also olive oil. On Cyprus, he would buy as much cotton as the galleon could take on board. If any money remained after the purchase of the cotton, he would buy leather, furs, and other goods from the island, after which he would sail to Tripoli and buy 250 quintals of charcoal. On his return journey, he would sell the goods bought on Cyprus in either Ancona or in Ragusa itself. On the 26th of November 1541, moreover, Niccolo di Polo, the captain of the ship Santo Giovanni Battista, insured to the value of 200 ducats 2 bales of cherry-colored cloth loaded on board his ship that would journey to Rhodes, Famagusta, and some Syrian ports. This insurance also covered the goods he would purchase from the sale of this cloth, and he undertook to make port at Messina, Genoa, Livorno, Marseille, and finally Ragusa. Cotton was grown on Cyprus and exported to Venice to an increasing extent during the late 15th and 16th centuries, while it continued to be grown in Syria as well. Therefore, it is unsurprising that 2 documents recording trade between Cyprus and Dalmatia concern this commodity. On the 14th of November 1541, Captain Nicolaou Pauli from the Adriatic island of Sipan reached an agreement with the Ragusan merchants Cristoforo Marini de Allegretto and Marino Marini Rationatoris, whereby he hired out his ship to them, undertaking on their behalf to sail from Ragusa to Rhodes, where he would remain for 10 days or less if required, taking on board ship those goods that the merchants had assigned to him. Thence he would sail to the ports of Famagusta in Cyprus, remaining there for 10 days, following which he would sail to the port of Latakia in Syria, waiting there for 2 months to take on board the cargo of unrefined and refined cotton. If the Ragusan merchants were unable to deliver this cotton to him there, or were unwilling to deliver it for some reason, then the captain was obliged to journey to Tripoli or to Beirut to receive the cotton. This accomplished, the captain would make port at Messina during his return journey, staying there for 4 days while his cargo was unloaded. Otherwise, he would journey with it either to the Adriatic or to the ports of Genoa, Livorno, or Marseille. Exports of Cypriot cotton to the Adriatic outlasted the period of Venetian rule on Cyprus. On the 24th of August 1574, 3 years after the island's conquest by the Ottomans, Biagio de Vincenzo, captain of the ship named San Francesco, agreed to hire a ship out to the Ragusan merchant Junio Bernardo de Cerva for a journey from Ragusa to Abu Qir in Alexandria in Egypt and to Cyprus, staying for 30 days at each port for the taking of merchandise on board and unloading this merchandise on its return journey at the ports of Taranto, Ragusa, and Venice. In Egypt, the ship would take leather hides on board, and on Cyprus, it would acquire cotton and other Cypriot products. Sea voyages were fraught with danger, which explains why 9 of the documents recording journeys made between Cyprus and the Adriatic are agreements involving maritime insurance, generally fixed at the insurance premium of 10 to 12% of the value of the goods insured. On the 13th of January 1569, the 2 Venetian merchants, Ioannis Antonius and Laurentius Francisci Girardi, authorized the Ragusan Bernardos de Pozza to undertake the recovery of 2 boxes of ginger, 2 bowls of cinnamon, and 3 boxes of cinnamon from the sunken ship named Barbara, that while journeying from Cyprus to Venice had gone down during a storm at the port of Chaftat, Ragusa Vetera, at the end of 1568. A later document of the 10th of February 1569 imparts the information that this ship had indeed been brought up from the depths and that its cargo included silks and spices. The Venetian fleet played a pivotal role in the defense of Venice's overseas possessions, providing a defensive shield for them. This fleet was important in administrative terms for the possessions of the Stato de Mar, and the Proveditore Generale dell'Armata was not simply a naval commander, but also the supreme authority over Venice's overseas colonies, during peacetime as well as in war. By the end of the 15th century, the Venetian navy was manned chiefly by Dalmatians, Albanians, and Greeks, with most of the personnel consisting of salaried crew members who joined the navy voluntarily. Sums of money were needed to pay for the equipment, personnel, and maintenance of this fleet, with loans from individuals forming one of the measures employed. On the 24th of January 1537, the Council of Ten instructed the Venetian government of Cyprus to repay within 6 years the loan that it had received from the Cypriot nobleman Eugenio Singredigo, the titular Count of Edessa and a member of one of the 4 prominent and wealthy Greek families on Cyprus that had been ennobled and had crossed over from the Greek to the Latin Rite, a precondition for ennoblement on both Lusignan and Venetian Cyprus. This nobleman had advanced 6,000 ducats to Venice, and according to the relevant document, the Council of Ten intended to use this money to arm the Venetian forces and to dispatch galleys to Dalmatia. To conclude, from the above, one sees that a variety of contacts between Cyprus and Dalmatia occurred during the late 15th and 16th centuries within the geographical and political framework of Venice's overseas empire, which provided the context in which these contacts took place. The available evidence indicates that most of these contacts were commercial, involving the movement of commodities by sea between Dalmatia, Cyprus, and other eastern Mediterranean destinations, grain being the principal commodity. Nonetheless, contacts of a professional nature also took place, with engineers, soldiers, and interpreters moving between Cyprus and Dalmatia in the service of the Venetian Republic. This took place within the context of warfare between Venice and the Ottoman Empire and the defensive works and diplomacy Venice initiated in order to deal with the Ottoman threat. Thank you.